Welcome back to Newsmax Now. I'm Miranda Kahn. Yahoo joins Draft Kings and FanDuel in halting all New York fantasy sports operations until new regulations pass. The state attorney made the announcement earlier this week. It comes after both Draft Kings and FanDuel agreed to stop taking bets in New York and put their legal battle with the state attorney on hold, at least until September. Now, the deal is supposed to give the state legislature time to pass new rules that will allow the sites to operate legally with oversight from the state. Last month, DraftKings announced it would also be acquiring a company called Countermove, a fantasy mixed martial arts website. Earlier, we spoke with Joe Gagliano, the author of the book No Gray Areas, to get his take on this acquisition.
Well, you know, with DraftKings or FanDuel or any type of fantasy game that's out there, it's so hard not to see the correlation for how corruption can creep into that industry. And I think it's the way it's going right now, it's so early that you haven't really heard the stories of the negative stories and the ugliness that's going to come out of it.
We've heard some. I mean, these sites are incredibly popular with the folks who like to play them. In New York, though, last November, there was actually a protest outside the Attorney General's office, a guy named Eric Schneiderman. Schneiderman says that these games are more like the lottery and he wants to regulate them. And they did an investigation, his office did, that revealed the top 1% of players reaped the majority of the winnings. Is this the type of corruption you're talking about?
I think the corruption is that anytime you're going to link rewards or money or gambling to personal performance, then you're going to have corruption, John. That's what I'm talking about. And I'm talking about there's going to be inside information given out. It's no different than getting information from a guy that's on a board of a publicly traded company. When you get that information and you benefit from it, you're going to go to prison. That's insider trading.
Right.
With this type of corruption, what I'm referring to, John, is it's no different if you're a trainer inside of a locker room or on a team staff or a water.
You're talking about the moral hazard, the incentive for these trainers to traffic this type of information because it can be used for these daily sports sites. I do want to take a listen, though, to something that one of those protesters had to say in front of the New York Attorney General's office. Let's take a listen.
Generally, it's a positive thing, and as a country and as a state, we want to encourage, growing industries. This being one of the biggest and fastest growing ones in the last few years. I mean, that's what makes our country great, is that you can see growth like this. So to see it just curtailed by a politician in such a sudden manner, it feels like it has more to do with politics than with actual good legislative decision making.
So they were cheering fantasy for all. I mean, I think she actually kind of makes a good point. This just goes to show you how popular these sites are. And these regulators, if they want to regulate them, they're going to have to deal with a lot of backlash because we're talking about millions of people using them, right?
I'm all for growing companies and growing industries, John. But what this has the recipe to do is blow up with internal corruption. And you look at who's driving it, but who won't publicly acknowledge that they're driving it. You look at FanDuel and sports, or DraftKings being their major investors are Comcast or NBC. You look at the owners of the leagues, the owners of the teams, they're billionaires. They will not publicly acknowledge or endorse the fantasy world, but yet privately behind closed doors, they absolutely love it. They embrace it because it gets more eyeballs to watch their games because people can watch games and teams that have subpar winning records, but yet maintain an interest level in that game just because one of their players might be playing. So
it definitely makes things more interesting. There's no doubt about it. Let's talk about the book a little bit, No Gray Area. Take me back to 1993 and your involvement with this point-shaving scandal with the 1993 Arizona State men's basketball team. How did you help orchestrate the largest point-shaving scandal in history?
Well, 93, 94, I was trading bond futures at the Board of Trade in Chicago. My brother went to school at Arizona State University. And, I took trips out there. I was making a lot of money at a young age. I took trips out here, I should say, because I'm in Arizona now. And one of the gentlemen that lived next door to my brother at the time on campus was a bookmaker. On campus. And one of the basketball players, the leading player on the team, Headache Smith, got into him for some money for betting games and gambling. And, the only way that headache could see out of the debt was to fix a few games. And I was approached with this deal from Benny. I orchestrated it. I financed it. It was supposed to be 2 games on the onset. 2 games turned into 3. 3 games turned into 4. And before we know it, a whole world of headache and a whole world of pain came after me.
Yeah, we're seeing some video right now of ESPN as recently as last year looking into the issue of point shaving. The book obviously focuses a lot on consequences. What was the single worst consequence that you had to deal with as a result of your story here?
Well, being labeled a felon, granted that case was 20 years ago, John, and I can tell you that label I really had a hard time shedding from myself. And I was always out to prove to everyone that I was not that person of what we perceive a felon to be.
Joseph Gagliano, the new book is called No Gray Area. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, John, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Coming up next, we'll talk to Newsmax health editor Nick Tate about former President Jimmy Carter and his cancer recovery. We'll tell you about a new drug that played a huge role in his treatment. That's coming up.